I have some thoughts on Fall Guys Ranked that I need to share. Is it good? Is it bad? What should they change and what did they do well? That's what I'm answering in this video. I'm going to try my best to touch on absolutely everything I possibly can, mainly with my own thoughts, but I also looked through what the community had to say before making this. So I feel like I'm in a perfect spot to judge Ranked Knockout compared to a lot of other players, because I'm definitely not casual by any means, but also I'm not an ultra sweat that wears those stupid disco shoes, 360 dives my way through 12 hours of practicing customs every day. I will try and speak for and understand both of those sides in this video, but I think the fact I can come from somewhere in between for a lot of this should be helpful. And also, I've already played this first ranked cycle a lot more than I reasonably should have, which you'll know if you saw this video of mine. Right, time to get into my actual thoughts. I think a nice place to start is with the point system, since that's the core of any game's ranked mode. I'll quickly explain how it currently works. Fall Guys has 8 ranks: Rookie, Contender, Bronze, Silver, Gold, Ace, Star, and finishes at Superstar. Rookie to Silver have 3 subdivisions each, and Gold to Star have 5 subdivisions each, for a total of 28 divisions. I think this in itself is fine. You could complain about the number of subdivisions not being the same for each rank, but to be honest, I think it's a good way to make the second half of the ranks harder, while still feeling like you're making some progress at a similar pace. What I mean is, if Gold and above didn't have 5 divisions each, it'd probably be more points for each division instead, so it'd feel a lot slower. So this system is fine, but I think something that might need tweaking is the actual scoring system. Right now, all that matters is what round you reach in a ranked game. Reaching round 1, 2, 3 or the final always gives a consistent amount of points, and that's kind of my first problem. The round you reach is all that matters. You could speedrun first place in Lily Leapers, or you could just scrape by with last place, and the game sees no difference between those two. I'm not saying the first place being should rank up a whole division and the last place being should be punished, obviously that'd be stupid, and there are factors like spawn points that make placement not entirely skill based, but I do think there should be a little extra incentive to do better in each round. The game already has a medal system. First place gets gold, top 20% is silver, and top 50% is bronze. All they do is give slightly extra fame right now. I think ranked needs that too, just for points instead of fame. They could also use the squad scoring system instead of medals. My point is just that placement should matter to some degree. Not a huge amount, but to some degree at least. As for what else they could do with the point system, well, let's take a look at the current system. It's hard to say exactly what changes they should make here. I think Mediatonic really just has to look at their own data for how many players reach each rank to know whether certain ones are too easy or too hard. But there is something I can point out here. The scoring system for everything except winning stays the same all the way from Rookie 1 to Silver 3, before becoming drastically less forgiving as soon as you hit Gold 1. It's really a shock to breeze through these first few ranks and then suddenly be stuck at Gold 1 because you start losing a lot of points in round 1 and 2 and barely getting anything for round 3. Then the amount you lose stays the same from Gold 1 all the way until Ace 5. So here's what I propose. If you lose round 1 in Silver, you should lose a small amount of points, which makes Silver just a bit harder, but then Gold could be made easier by these minus points being made a bit more forgiving, and then Ace and Star could stay the same and the difficulty ramp up would be a lot more steady. I just really think that sharp difficulty increase in Gold needs to be addressed somehow, and I think making Silver harder but Gold easier is a good way of addressing that. Right, next topic. Did they pick a good round pool? Well, mostly. Some of my complaints were invalidated because Fall Guys replaced Treasure Trove and Bubble Trouble with Slime Saloon and Slime Climb. The reason they were removed is for being too luck based, but there's still some points levels in here that are like that. So while I can't complain about how stupid it was to have Treasure Trove in this pool, there's still Frantic Factory and Leading Light, which to me are way too dependent on luck. And then there's also levels like Button Bashers and Hoopsie Legends that are probably more fair than those, but I still think people have the right to complain about being in ranked. There's always going to be some amount of luck in any Fall Guys level, of course, but you can usually offset it by just being good at the game. But the problem here is when you have a sweaty ranked lobby and every player has already mastered the level and is doing the optimal strategies, suddenly skill stops being so much of a factor and it becomes more luck dependent again. You can very obviously see that in levels like Frantic Factory, where the buttons light up completely randomly, and Leading Light, where the light's movement is random, but I think it's also noticeable in some less obvious levels. I'm going to use Hexagon as an example just because it's the easiest. Please don't get mad at me if you like this level. So everything about Hexagon is fully controlled by the players, but as I mentioned, in ranked everyone's super sweaty and already mastered the optimal strategies, so it essentially comes down to whoever just happens to be on the biggest island that another player cuts off, or whoever doesn't get landed on by another player at the last second. That's not always the case, but it is really often. I'll use Pine Climber as another example. Reaching the top of the level is 100% skill based, and even hitting somebody off at the top with the rubber chicken power up is skill based, of course, but when there's too many players to knock off, it just becomes a competition of who can jump at the last possible second to not hit the slime. I guess there's technically skill in timing that perfectly and accounting for your a ping, but like, come on. There's more examples, of course, but I'll leave it at those two since those are the easiest to explain. My point is just that some levels are more luck-based than others, even if they don't seem to have RNG elements at first glance. High-skill lobbies really put levels like that to the test, and unfortunately not every map is going to work well. It's hard for them to choose perfect levels for ranked, but I guess the solution is just trying their best, and then removing levels if enough people complain like they did for Treasure Trove. And also, not all of the community will agree on what's best. Some of you will absolutely disagree with me saying that Hexagon shouldn't be in ranked. And another point you might disagree with, Slime Climb and Slime Scraper shouldn't be in here either. They're fun, don't get me wrong, but they never eliminate anybody in ranked. It literally just takes you to an oversized final at the end. There's also some solutions beyond removing them, like making the slime rise faster, adding qualification limits, or for Hoopsy Legends you could remove gold hoops. It's never going to be perfect, but hopefully they can make it good enough with this feedback. This takes me on to my next point though. The round pool needs to be perfect for ranked, right? But currently ranked knockout is sharing the same round pool as the regular casual version of knockout. Is it possible to have a round pool be really good for both? I would argue no, it's not. While I'm strongly against something like Leading Light being in ranked, and yes, I'm still complaining about Leading Light, you can't stop me, I think it's a good level for casual lobbies that are more forgiving and where losing doesn't matter as much. Weigh the round pool towards ranked and casual were too boring and inaccessible for new players. Weigh it towards casual and ranked becomes an RNG fest that nobody can really enjoy. Try and balance it, nobody's going to be happy. I think they did the best they reasonably could with this idea, and most of the levels work well for both, but again, there's those few luck-based points levels that were clearly meant to make the casual experience a bit better, but made ranked really suffer. I understand why they decided that ranked and casual should be the same, since it gives you a space to practice and warm up or wind down, and it makes sure that everyone is experiencing the same levels no matter what they play. But I still think they should go back on it by letting the round pools be similar, but not identical. There's 30 levels in the pool right now. What if 25 were the same between both casual and ranked knockout, but then casual had 5 more, well, casual levels, and then ranked could have some harder ones that might be too much for newer players to handle. If Mediatonic really doesn't want to go back on this vote, maybe ranked could at least have different versions of the same levels, make some of the creative levels harder for ranked only, and force some of the hard variations of classic levels only in ranked. For example, force the hard variation of the Swiveler with extra bars and whatnot, then casual can just keep the easier version with less obstacles. Fall Guys OGs watching might remember hard mode from Legacy Fall Guys. It had quite a few exclusive variants that were too difficult for casual shows. Bring those back just for ranked mode, maybe even make harder variants more common for higher rank lobbies. That way both can still have the same levels pretty much, but more tailored for what the shows are actually going for, if that makes sense. I really don't see a downside to these ideas, and I really hope they can consider them. I mentioned there being 30 levels in the pool though, so I think we've got to touch on whether that's enough for there to be good variety. And I think it's close to being perfect, but there should just be a few more. I believe there's only 30 so that they could carefully handpick levels they thought would work well, particularly for ranked, which they mostly did a good job of. And another reason to limit the round pool is so that it's easier to learn. If there were 100 maps in the pool, it'd be impossible to learn for any new player and they'd have no chance. But when it's a smaller pool, you get each level more often, and if there's a few you struggle with, you could focus on practicing those in particular. I'm guessing Mediatonic felt like 30 maps was the sweet spot, but personally I think somewhere around 40 would be better. Right now it feels a bit repetitive, especially with how much you have to play to reach Superstar. Speaking of repetitive though, it's not just the size of the round pool that's the problem, it's also how often certain levels are being picked compared to others. This data is from fallalytics.com, so huge shout out to them. They basically track how often each level is appearing in each Fall Guys show, based on crowdsourced data of tens of thousands of games tracked from the Fall Guys tracker that a lot of PC players use. This is from a bit after Slime Climb and Slime Saloon replaced Treasure Trove and Bubble Trouble in this pool, so we'll ignore those 4 levels in here. Tundra Run was also replaced by Big Fans right before I'm uploading this, though that one won't affect any of my points here. But still you can see a clear trend. Some levels are way too common. The number 1 level is Slime Scraper, appearing in 20% of shows, which regardless of how you feel about it, that's too much for one level. And also notice how common the points levels are. Some of them, like Bubbling Brook, are very skill based and have a good place in ranked, but the way they're so much more common than the race levels is kinda wild. The reason for this is because most of the filler rounds, meaning round 2 and 3, are points, so most of your races are only going to be openers. They should have definitely thought this through though, because even with the 2 levels they added, you're still unlikely to have a session without without noticing the point spam. You can also see Hexagon is the most common final, which will likely become even more common now that Slime Climb is in the pool. The reason Hex appears more is because it's the fallback level for Knockout and Ranked, meaning if the game has no other level it can select, it forces Hex, which happens if you enter round 4 with more than 15 players. Very common if you get Slime Climb and or Slime Scraper to eliminate nobody. And in general, Hex, Kraken and Blast Ball are noticeably more common than Roll-Off and Creative ones. Regardless of which finals you prefer, it's weird that it's so uneven. This is mainly a weird quirk with the player counts. These can support 15 players while Roll-Off needs 10 or less, and the 3 creative finals used to also be 10 players but did get bumped up to 12. Still though, the game will absolutely favour these top 3 unless we make further changes. And it's not just player counts by the way, because if we look at these 4 finals that were all 10 players max when this data was captured, Roll-Off is still more common than the 3 creative ones, so it's probably safe to say there's some kind of weighting towards non-creative levels, which whether intentional or not I think needs to be looked at. That's really weird. Right, enough yapping about the round pools and variety. Next topic. Most finals are designed to be a one winner only. The round goes until the last bean is standing and wins, but as I'm sure you're aware, you can actually time out most finals if there are multiple beans alive for 5 minutes. The main ones that get timed out in this pool are Kraken Slam and Roll-Off. I've seen a huge divide in the community about whether this is good or bad for a ranked mode. Some people think you shouldn't be allowed to time out in ranked because it goes against the competitive nature of it, and also sharing a win gives the same amount of rank points as winning by yourself. Others think timeouts take a huge amount of skill and should be rewarded and encouraged. What's my take? Well, I understand both sides completely, so it's a bit tricky for me to say, but I tend to lean more towards timeouts being a good thing, and that's mainly because of how grabbing works in this game. I'm not going to go into a huge in-depth rant about how grabbing works in Fall Guys, but generally it isn't very skill-based. It actually tends to favour high ping players. You might notice yourself sometimes getting grabbed by somebody who's on the other side of the map. Okay, slight exaggeration, but you know what I mean. You get grabbed by somebody who on your screen should not be in grabbing range of you. That's because on their screen they are in range, and the higher the ping they have, the more likely this is to happen, and obviously it's very hard to avoid being grabbed by somebody who quite literally shouldn't be close enough to grab you. And that's the main reason I think timeouts are a good thing for ranked, at least unless they do a massive overhaul to how the grabbing system works. Feel free to disagree because I know this is very opinion based, but to me timing out is a lot more skill based than having to use grabbing in its current state to end up as the last bean standing. Now that mainly goes for Roll-Off because Kraken's timeouts work very differently. Instead of the level just getting progressively harder until a timeout, all 4 quadrants of the map actually start tilting around the 4-minute mark, which is meant to make timeouts impossible, but using a cheap trick that's, let's be honest, every ranked sweat has already mastered, you can actually survive this. I don't really know whether they should just shorten the timer so you don't have to learn this trick, whether they should patch it since it's kind of an exploit or what, but I do think if there's a timeout that's actually a problem right now, it'd be Kraken and not something like Roll-Off. Maybe other maps can be timed out too, but these are the main 2 happening right now. Since I've been talking about Kraken Slam though, that segues nicely into talking about the bugs and glitches that are plaguing ranked, and I'm starting with the invisible or phantom tentacles. Just look at the footage in the background right now. There's no tentacle hitting me, I'm just randomly being launched into the air for no reason. I have no idea what's causing this, but it's a big problem. It's not a one-off. This happened to me and got me eliminated countless times while doing my challenge to reach Superstar in a day. It's also happening to a ton of other people and isn't ping related or anything, it's just a bug with the game. As for another level specific bug, they never actually fixed full tilt seesaws after breaking them a while ago. I didn't record one fully freaking out, but hopefully this clip shows it well enough. It's clearly moving in ways that it's not supposed to. I think it's just important to acknowledge that some levels do have specific issues that need addressing, and ideally I think any with glaring issues like this should just get removed from ranked. They've already replaced Treasure Trove and Bubble Trouble just based on feedback, so can we also replace levels that literally aren't working properly, please? It's really frustrating when you lose rank points to the game just being broken. If there's an extremely rare issue or one that isn't really game breaking, then maybe a level can stay, but to me these 2 are common enough and cause enough losses. Those aren't the only issues in ranked though. I've got to quickly mention hackers. This isn't a bug, but it is the anti-cheat not working as intended. I didn't encounter too many in my journey of trying to reach Superstar in a day. I think I managed to just cut most of them out of that video, but the fact I encountered any at all is a huge problem, and lots of players encountered even more than I did. The anti-cheat was seemingly broken since February's update, so it's honestly unacceptable that they launched a ranked mode 2 months later without even trying to do anything about it. Remember, if there's one hacker out of the 32 spots in your lobby, then you're immediately not allowed to win. At least if you notice one in round 1, you can just leave the game and not be punished, but that's also an issue. Why can you do that without consequences? You lose points in gold and above if you don't get far in the game, so if you know you're about to lose, you can just back out to avoid that penalty. Yes, I used this a few times on my road to Superstar, but I don't feel good about it, and I don't feel like like it should have ever been allowed. Maybe they need to fix issues with crashes and disconnects first, which I'll touch on in a minute, but at the very least, intentionally leaving the game by pressing leave game should not stop you from losing points. Next, rewards bug. If you're unfamiliar, if you lose towards the end of a final, usually a few seconds before the winner wins, there's a chance you get what's called the rewards bug. You get a loading screen for 30 seconds before being told, nope, couldn't load your rewards for that match, but they'll be automatically claimed soon, so don't worry. There's 3 reasons this is a problem. First of all, it lies, it won't claim those rewards ever, the game will forget that match happened and you won't get anything for it. Second, it seems to be happening a lot more often in this ranked knockout update compared to previous updates in the game. And third, because it's ranked, this also affects your ranked points, so if you get the rewards bug in a ranked match, you literally don't rank up. You reached a final, you played a full game, and you get 0 points for it because the game just decided no. You should know how much this affected me and slowed me down if you watch my trying to reach superstar video. This is probably one of the biggest issues that ranked is facing, and it seriously needs to be addressed. Nothing is more painful than playing a full match and doing super well, just barely losing the final and then getting 0 progress because the game didn't feel like it. Next issue I want to mention is disconnects, crashes, freezes, lag, that kind of thing. This seems to vary a lot between players, and I think it's mainly dependent on what platform you're playing on, but there's definitely some kind of server issues going on, and the game is definitely not being optimized well enough on lower end hardware like PS4, Xbox One and Switch. Even on a high-end PC, I noticed an issue that I've never noticed before. After 6, 7, 8 hours of having the game open and playing ranked, the game was noticeably slowing down. Loading screens were taking longer, there was some frame drops during levels, getting back to the menu progressively took longer, and it just kept slowing down as I played more until I restarted the game. I know most people aren't doing marathon sessions of Fall Guys like that, but I think this is what's happening on lower end hardware in just 1, maybe 2 hours of having the game open instead. I had plenty of people in my stream chat and comments saying they lost quite a lot of rank points because they were lagging in the first few seconds or so of a level starting, especially on PS4, and I just can't imagine trying to reach superstar if that happened to me. You're probably good in a casual show if you take a few extra seconds to get started and moving, but in ranked, that's very likely going to get you eliminated even if you do a perfect run after that. And yeah, disconnects too. Not something I experienced a lot, but does seem to be happening to people, even if they have a stable internet connection. For me, it mainly happened when loading into round 1, so it didn't happen mid-game. But as well as disconnecting in round 1's loading screen, I also had issues before even getting into the game. Matchmaking has been very buggy for a long time, and I could go on and on about matchmaking issues, but I'm going to talk very specifically about what affected me while playing ranked. And for the most part, that was just getting kicked out of matchmaking. The game would say match found with 32 players, start populating, then right before it starts, I get jump scared by the plinth my being stands on in the main menu because whoops, I guess I'm not allowed in that match, better try again. This happened maybe every 3 or 4 games and sometimes would happen multiple times in a row before actually letting me in a match. Again, this type of thing has been a problem in the game for a long time. It's been so long since matchmaking actually worked properly, but now that there's a ranked mode, of course it's affecting that too. Please fix it. While we're talking about matchmaking, how about we talk about how ranked matchmaking works in the first place? So for a few years, Fall Guys had skill-based matchmaking, commonly shortened to SBMM. You'd be placed in one of 3 buckets depending on how good the game decided you were. With the ranked update, this was removed from all shows except obviously ranked. Mediatonic's official blog says, to keep the competition fair, ranked knockouts matchmaking system will place you against players as close to your current rank as possible. So is it the old system or placing you with players close to your rank? It genuinely feels like neither. I'm noticing crown rank 1s in my lobbies, and no, I don't mean hidden crown ranks. And there's so many reports of people in like bronze getting in lobbies with superstars, so what's happening here? Well, first, I don't think Mediatonic is lying. If it was using the old skill-based matchmaking system, then I don't think crown rank 1s would be in lobbies with crown rank 80s, so it's definitely using a new system based on rank. But as for why the lowest ranks are being paired with the highest, I simply think there's not enough high ranks and low ranks actively playing that they can get into suitable matches without mixing. Obviously, when you queue for a match as a gold 4 player, there's not 31 players in gold 4 also queuing at the same time on the same region, so the game has to pick a wider range. So let's say for gold 4, it wants to find anybody between silver and ace, but what if it can't? Then there's 2 options, either wait for enough players in that range to be queuing or choose a wider range. I think Fall Guys is definitely not doing the waiting thing. I think it's absolutely prioritizing fast matchmaking over actual fair matches, which, yeah, nobody wants to be stuck in the queue for 5 or 10 minutes after every game, but it also feels very weird that the lowest ranks can get paired with the highest. I don't know the solution. Maybe there's just not enough people playing ranked for it to reasonably be made fair, but it's still definitely an issue, and if they can address it somehow without making queue times too bad, that'd be awesome. Queue times might be a bit of an issue with this next idea, but still worth talking about. Give us different ranked modes. Right now there's only one way to play ranked, and that's ranked knockout, which is fine. It absolutely makes sense for a first version of a ranked mode to just be the main mode of Fall Guys, but an obvious suggestion to jump to is ranked duos and squads. I think these would have to be the same round pool as knockout, except replace some solo only levels like button bashers with team only levels, or at least ones that would work better in a team like volleyball. Not launching with duos and squads feels like a huge missed opportunity though, you know, not being able to play ranked with friends and rank up together. It could share the same rank and have the same rewards and work the exact same. I really don't see what would need changing. I heard some people say it might be too easy to be carried if this was added, but first of all, who cares if somebody gets carried? And second, it's not even that easy to carry somebody. If they use the existing system at duos and squads, all players in the team have to earn enough points to qualify. If there's a duo with one really good and one really bad player, let's be honest, it's not going to be easy for them to reach a final. So yeah, I don't think that's a concern. They could also just have separate ranks between solos and squads ranked, but personally I don't think that's necessary. Just add duos and squads ranked with similar round pools to knockout. Next, I have a suggestion that's a bit out there: ranked LTMs. I'm not saying every LTM needs a ranked mode, and I'm not saying they should be in any rush to implement this, but I think after a while ranked will get a bit stale being the same format of just different round pools and rewards, so it'd be cool if for some cycles we could play a ranked LTM instead. Something like extreme ranked would go super hard and work very well in a ranked setting, and they could even pull off some more random ones, like for April Fool's Day next year, give us a ranked 32 player Royal Fumble. Why the heck not? That obviously wouldn't be very competitive, but I'm just throwing ideas out there. Having different versions of ranked play for special occasions would be awesome. For something like ranked extreme, it could easily replace ranked knockout for a cycle, but if they did something more silly, then maybe it would have to be a separate mode tied to a separate rank just to kind of keep the main ranked mode's integrity. Next point is the rewards you get for ranked. All of them are on screen now, but basically the grand reward for Superstar is 150 crowns, 10k kudos, the Superstar Cycle 1 emoticon, and the Supreme Idol costume. I've seen some people say this isn't enough, and here's what I think. The crowns are fair enough. A total of 150 for Superstar is perfectly fine. It doesn't need to be any higher, and it doesn't need to give you the crowns from previous ranks. The kudos though, here's a very simple way of showing how 10k isn't enough. Ranked cycles last 8 weeks, and these kudos mastery items in the shop rotate every 16 weeks. So in my eyes, reaching Superstar in 2 cycles should be enough to buy the 3 kudos mastery costumes, but each costume is 18k kudos, and Superstar gives 10k. You can't buy a single costume for reaching Superstar. You need it twice just to afford one, with barely anything left over. So it's 54k kudos to buy all 3 costumes, and they're available for 2 ranked cycles. So at the very least, Superstar should probably give around 27k, so if you consistently reach Superstar, you can consistently afford these costumes. That sounds a lot more fair to me. That's the crowns and kudos sorted. Let me quickly complain about the emoticons. I think they're a great idea, and they should do it for every cycle, but why am I only allowed one of them? There's valid reasons to want all 4. Maybe you think Star has a nicer looking icon than Superstar, or maybe you just like collecting cosmetics. I'm fine with not getting the crowns and kudos from previous ranks, but you should absolutely get the emoticons. And then in these rewards, other than the kudos, crowns and emoticons, we have 1 costume, and that's it. I'm not asking for a whole Fame Pass worth of cosmetics. Obviously that'd be insane, but I originally expected 1 cosmetic per rank. Maybe smaller things for the lower ranks like accessories, banners or nicknames, then full costumes could be the final few. I don't know. I don't want people to miss out on too much if they're too casual to reach a high rank, but there definitely still needs to be more incentive to reach your top than there currently is. Just 1 costume for Star and Superstar feels a bit weak right now. As well as the rewards for reaching certain ranks though, I think we also need a bit more incentive to play ranked in general. Give extra fame for playing ranked. Even extreme gives extra fame compared to regular modes, but ranked doesn't. That feels really weird to me, and it's only 1 crown for winning ranked when extreme is 2. Maybe if it's slowly increased for win reward depending on what rank you are. Rookie wins can be worth 1 crown, sure, but maybe winning in Superstar could be 2, even 3. Overall, the rewards are decent, they just need to mostly be increased, and let us get the emoticons from the lower ranks please. There's really no reason to limit us like this. Along with those ideas, there should just, in general, be more incentive to play after reaching Superstar. Right now you get a number of points, and that's literally it. There's already players obsessing over making this go as high as possible, and there are some fan-made leaderboards being built right now that I'm sure will be pretty popular, but they've got to make an official leaderboard. Fortnite has a leaderboard on their website of the absolute top players in their ranked mode, and also gives you a number in game showing what place in the world you are after reaching the top rank. It'd be awesome if Fall Guys just copied this exact thing, especially if the leaderboard was visible in game. There's also some other things this points number could do. First, it could show somewhere else, either even after the ranked cycle is over, whether that's on a leaderboard that gets archived with previous cycles or a way to check your rank / points from previous cycles in game. Second, there should be a way to show it off to people in game, either a nickname or something like a phrase or emoticon that would update with what placement you are in the world, or at least with your amount of points. There's so many things they could do to make it feel worthwhile to farm these points. There's also the idea of giving an exclusive cosmetic to a small number of players, maybe to the top 1% of rank points or top 500 rank points, something like that. There would be a downside to this since it'd kind of encourage people to no life the game, which isn't healthy, but it's still an idea they could consider. They'd also have to ensure that people won't share accounts, make sure hackers are dealt with, and make sure people can't do snipes and other forms of teaming, and obviously remove people from leaderboards and ban them from playing ranked if they're found to be doing something that's blatantly cheating. I'm also just going to list off a few extra things they could do that I don't really need to go in depth about. Add a scoreboard to points levels so you know how well you're actually doing compared to everyone else. Disable piggybacking to prevent teaming. Force people to play on automatic servers to help prevent ping abuse and snipes. Add some community levels if they're really well received, like Jungle Wall. Actually market this mode instead of expecting it to get popular on its own. Okay, as for that last one, I think this first cycle of ranked is kind of a test run. They didn't want to go completely viral, and it's just to see what we think and get feedback, and they will eventually expand and maybe make some kind of overhaul at some point with a bunch of stuff I said in this video, and they'll actually market it that time. If you think I've made some good points so far, definitely like the video so it does better, because that'll make Mediatonic a lot more likely to see and listen to this if it performs well. I think the final question is it too easy or too hard to rank up and reach Superstar? A lot of good players did it in between 6 and 12 hours. It did take me longer. I won't spoil exactly what happened for those who haven't seen my video yet, but generally a lot of people did it in a day if they just had the free time to play Fall Guys all day. And that sounds bad, people completing it in a day when it's an 8-week cycle, but I think you've got to remember, casual players need longer, and also not everyone has the free time to play that much Fall Guys. I think it's important that Superstar is still attainable even to somebody who doesn't have the chance to play every day and can only get an hour or two in each time they play. And it will actually take most people a few weeks or so to start hitting Superstar, because right now most people I'm seeing are not even close. It's only the true tryhards that are already Superstars, so it's tricky to balance. I honestly think that the current speed to reach Superstar should be perfectly fine, as long as they add the extra incentives to keep playing even after reaching Superstar, like I previously mentioned. The main reason people want Superstar to be tough is so that it can be a huge flex, but if there was more incentive to earn points after Superstar, then that could be the true end goal, and Superstar being a reasonable achievement makes a lot more sense. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, along with anything I've said in this video and anything you think I missed talking about, so feel free to comment. Watch my journey trying to reach Superstar on the left, and stay tuned for more content coming soon.